The Haunted Manor. It was a dark and stormy night when the Wilson family arrived at the old manor house on the edge of town. The home had been abandoned for decades, ever since the horrific murders that took place there 20 years ago. Mia Wilson tried to peer through the dust-coated windows, but all she could see was her own reflection staring back. Her husband Mark fumbled with the keys, finally getting the heavy front door to creak open. A musty smell wafted out, along with a chill that prickled the hairs on the back of Mia's neck. She wanted to turn and run, but their financial situation had left them with no other choice. This dilapidated manor was their last hope for a place to live. The Wilsons had fallen on hard times since Mark lost his job. They sold everything just to get by, but it still wasn't enough. Eviction notices piled up, bill collectors called at all hours, and they had no family to turn to. Moving into this inherited old house in a new town was their chance at a fresh start. At least that's what Mark kept telling her. Mia tried to share his optimism, but it was difficult. She was 8 months pregnant and exhausted. Starting over would be hard enough without having to cope with living in this creepy old place. They walked inside, footsteps echoing on the scarred hardwood floors. Cobwebs clung to the chandelier above. The wallpaper was faded and peeling, and the furniture was draped in yellowed sheets. Mia shivered from the cold or from fear. She wasn't sure which. Mark squeezed her hand reassuringly. "It just needs some work, that's all," he said. "We'll make it feel like home in no time." Upstairs, they located the master bedroom and began unpacking their suitcases. Mia sat on the edge of the bed, and a cloud of dust puffed up around her. She coughed and looked around. Heavy antique furnishings lined the walls, along with a cracked mirror mounted above the fireplace. Through the dirt, she could make out intricate carvings in the dark wood of the headboard. It was old and worn, but clearly had been lovely at one time. She tried to imagine how grand this room must have looked when it was first built, so full of life and happiness, not the empty shell of a home it was now. Later that night, Mia lay awake, listening to the sound of wind howling outside. It whistled through gaps in the walls and rattled the windows in their frames. Mark was sound asleep beside her, but she felt unsettled, like someone was watching her in the darkness. Suddenly she heard a loud thump overhead, followed by the creaking of floorboards, as if someone was walking in the attic. Mia clutched the blanket tight. "It's just the house settling," she told herself. But still, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were not alone here. She squeezed her eyes shut and tried to sleep, hoping for better days ahead. The next morning, Mark woke Mia early. "Time to start fixing this place up," he announced cheerfully. After a quick breakfast, they set to work. Mark tackled the outside first, mowing the overgrown lawn and pruning the tangled hedges. Inside, Mia cleared away cobwebs and scrubbed the floors and walls. She kept glancing nervously at the ceiling, but told herself the noises she heard last night were just in her imagination. To distract herself, she focused on decorating the nursery for the baby. It was the one room that felt bright and welcoming, unlike the rest of this dreary house. As she folded tiny onesies and hung baby toys above the crib, she allowed herself to feel a small glimmer of hope. Maybe they could be happy here after all. As the days passed, their efforts revealed the handsome structure and elegant details hidden beneath years of neglect. They still heard strange sounds from time to time, but Mia tried to ignore them. Things seemed to be looking up for the Wilsons. Mark's freelance graphic design business was bringing in some money, and Mia landed a part-time job at the library. For the first time in ages, their bank account wasn't frighteningly empty. On the outside, their life resembled a charming small-town existence, but inside the manor, darkness lurked. One night, Mia woke with a start. She thought she heard a child crying somewhere in the manor, though it sounded distant and faint, like an echo of the past. Mia lay very still, listening. Just when she convinced herself it was only part of a dream, it came again, the soft, sad sound of a child sobbing. Goosebumps prickled Mia's skin. She shook Mark awake and asked, "Do you hear that?" He mumbled sleepily, "Hear what?" The crying had stopped, leaving Mia unsure if she really heard it at all. Mark hugged her and said, "Just try to rest, honey." But a gnawing dread took hold of Mia. She knew that something menacing haunted this house, and it was not about to let them go. During the day, Mia searched for clues to prove her suspicions. In the attic, she found a dusty old trunk. Inside were faded newspaper clippings about the horrible massacre that happened here years before. The original owners, the Radcliffes, along with their 6-year-old son Michael, were viciously murdered. No suspect was ever found. Mia learned that afterward, Michael was often seen playing quietly by himself in the gardens. Guests would even comment on speaking with the polite young boy in the halls at night, not realizing he was a ghost who still lingered here. Chilled, Mia wondered if Michael's was the crying she heard. She had to find a way to help his soul find peace. That night when the crying woke her, Mia followed the sound to the nursery. There, in the rocking chair, sat a pale, wispy figure of a little boy. He looked up with sad eyes and whispered, "I want my mommy." Mia's heart ached for this child trapped between worlds. She remembered reading that Michael loved lullabies, so she sang softly to him until his eyelids drooped and he faded away. The next night, Mia sang again, and the next. It became a comforting ritual. The ghostly boy even started to smile as she serenaded him, and the uneasy feeling in the house began to lift. Until late one night, when Mia was jolted awake by a loud crash and a scream, she rushed from her room to find Mark sprawled at the bottom of the stairs, clutching his leg. He must have tripped over a loose floorboard at the top. But as Mia tried to help him up, a dark figure lunged from the shadows and shoved her backwards. She tumbled down the last few steps, hitting the floor painfully on her side. Looking up in terror, she saw a grinning, wild-eyed man in ragged clothes looming over them. His hands were covered in dripping blood, and in them he held a large knife. Paralyzed by fear, Mia recognized him from the old newspaper clippings. Jasper Rhodes, Michael Radcliffe's uncle, who went mad after the family's murder. He was sent to live out his days locked away at the sanitarium. But now here he stood, cackling maniacally. Mia's blood turned to ice in her veins. Jasper's eyes fixed upon her bulging, pregnant belly, and he crept closer, raising the knife to strike. Mark screamed, "No," and tried to drag himself in front of Mia to protect her, but Jasper just kicked him viciously and sent him skidding across the floor. Certain they were about to meet the same grisly fate as the Radcliffes, Mia and Mark clutched each other, sobbing. Suddenly, Jasper froze. His eyes went wide with terror, bulging wildly in their sockets. The knife slipped from his hands, hitting the floor with a clang. He began screaming, "No, Michael, please!" The ghostly little boy had appeared behind him, small and pale, but with a powerful rage blazing in his eyes. Jasper howled in agony, tearing at his hair and raking his fingernails down his face. Terror gripped him as Michael's ghost approached, forcing Jasper back against the wall. The madman's crazed shrieks echoed through the manor, mingled with the rage-filled cries of the child's ghost taking its revenge at last. A blinding flash lit up the darkness. When it faded, Jasper lay slumped on the floor, eyes staring sightlessly ahead. He was finally dead. Michael's tortured spirit could rest In the stillness that followed, Mark and Mia clung to each other, weeping, unable to believe they had survived the night's horror. As they stumbled out of that terrible house, Mia prayed the evil was gone for good. She hoped young Michael was at peace as he passed into the light. In the years to come, the old manor sat abandoned once more. But Mia and Mark started over in their cozy little cottage on the edge of town. They worked hard and made a warm home filled with laughter and joy. The nightmares of that cursed house remained locked away in the past, and Mia made sure to always tuck her little ones into bed with a lullaby. For one should never forget the comfort a gentle song can bring, not when the darkness creeps in. Please like, share, and subscribe for more creepy tales from the netherworld. Thanks for your support. Until next time, sweet dreams.